Welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Dan Barker. I'm co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation.
And I'm Liz Cavell, Associate Counsel at FFRF.
Last weekend was FFRF's 46th annual convention. Today, we're going to look back at some of that amazing event.
It was a lot of fun. We had great speakers, great attendees, and entertainment. And this is not your normal Ask an Atheist show. We would still like to hear your thoughts, especially if you attended the convention. So, as usual, you can put your comments and questions in the Facebook chat, or you can email them to askanatheist@ffrf.org.
And here's a link you can go to see all of our speakers, all their presentations in full. They aren't all posted yet, but they will be up soon.
And the convention had a wide variety of speakers. We had music and events, but the common theme was the threat of Christian nationalism to our freedom and democracy. So first up, we want to highlight abortion rights legal expert Mary Ziegler. Let's take a listen.
Good arguments and litigation strategies never hurt. But the anti-abortion movement didn't win because its arguments were good. It was making the same arguments when I was a baby, when I was 10, and when I was 15 than it did in 2022. What changed was the people hearing the arguments and the way the Supreme Court behaved. This was a Supreme Court that didn't seem interested either in its own reputation or in the will of the people, something that's unusual. The Supreme Court rarely deviates far from popular opinion and suffers consequences when it does. Yet in Dobbs, the court recognized quite clearly the idea that overturning Roe might be a threat to its legitimacy. To this, Justice Alito said, "I'm not sure if that's right. We're not in the business of measuring our legitimacy. And even if we could, it wouldn't matter. That's not what we're here to care about." We've seen the court take a pretty big hit from that. Justice Alito, too, told us that the only rights we have, other than the ones spelled out in the text of the Constitution, are those that would have been recognized at the time the 14th Amendment was written, at a time before women could vote, at a time before people of color could meaningfully vote, and a time at which white men who didn't have a lot of money really reliably couldn't vote. So, I don't know how many of us in this room could have voted at the time, but it's probably pretty low. Definitely not me, and probably not most of all y'all either. And at that point, of course, what other rights are in jeopardy? Well, of course, the right to contraception, because it was precisely in the 19th century that contraception was being criminalized by people like Anthony Comstock for the first time. Certainly not the right to same-sex marriage or same-sex intimacy, because those things were being criminalized in different ways in the 19th century. Potentially, Dobbs means something different for equality, too. This is what conservatives are arguing now in cases involving transgender youth and drag. They're arguing, in effect, that Dobbs means you can discriminate against someone based on their ability to get pregnant, and that's not sex discrimination. So pregnancy discrimination is okay, discrimination based on your ability, access to abortion is okay, discrimination based on any kind of health care that only one kind of sex could get, potentially, is okay. So we're seeing Dobbs resurface in cases about gender-affirming care and drag, too.
Mary Ziegler's latest book is called Roe, The History of a National Obsession, and it's available wherever you get your books.
And you could see that there were more than 500 people in that auditorium. It was a pretty exciting event.
It was.
Here is a favorite speaker, the Washington Post contributing columnist Kate Cohen, talking about her new book, We of Little Faith.
Here is a list of the heroic acts I have taken to further the cause of free thought. These are all spoilers. Please buy the book anyway. Number 1, I told my children that religion was the same as myth. It was a story that people made up to explain how the world works. Number 2, I told another mom at a first grade Halloween party that we didn't send our kids to a religious preschool because, and I quote, "we don't believe in God or anything." Very brave. I told my son that heaven was just as true as anything else we could make up about what happens after you die, but no more true than that. I told an acquaintance of my mother's when he asked if I was still Jewish that I still like the food. But I don't believe in any supernatural beings. And number 5, in the dramatic climax of my super dramatic memoir, I told my father-in-law that no, my son would not be having a bar mitzvah.
Again, Kate Cohen's latest book is We of Little Faith. And I noticed at the convention, the speakers were 60% female, but there were some male speakers.
Yeah, awesome. Well, speaking of male speakers, Andrew Seidel from Americans United, and the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberties, Amanda Tyler, who started the group Christians Against Christian Nationalism, so important, spoke about the challenges of confronting religious privilege and the threat of Christian nationalism in our government and laws. So we're going to check out some excerpts from their speeches, which were 2 of a 3-part series on Friday morning on Saturday morning on the threat of Christian nationalism. So here's Andrew.
The questions presented when religion and the law collide are not that hard. They're not that complicated, and they're actually pretty easy to resolve, especially the cases that have come before this court. Unless, of course, there's some maybe ulterior motive behind those cases. All you have to do is draw 3 basic lines. Okay, now, in the book, I creatively refer to these as lines number 1, lines number 2, and lines number 3. Listen, try to keep up, okay? This is what I mean about shunning jargon, though, okay? So first, we distinguish between belief and action, right? Your right to believe is absolute. Your right to act on that belief is not. So I open the book with several stories about drivers who let Jesus take the wheel. This happens. They are free to believe that Jesus is a backseat driver. But if they act on that belief, the civil law can step in and say no, right? We can fine them, we can take away their license, maybe even send them to prison or maybe some therapy. Belief is unlimited, action is limited. And that brings us to the second line. Okay, if it is limited, then where can the government step in and say no? Where is it appropriate for the government to enter into the equation? And the answer here is also pretty simple. It's where the rights of other people begin. You've all heard that your right to swing your fist ends at the other person's nose. Your right to freely exercise your religion ends where the rights of other people begin. Period, full stop. Religion is not a license to harm others or infringe their rights in any way. And then line number 3 is also pretty easy, and it should be a favorite of everybody here, and that's the separation of church and state. Our government has no religion to exercise, nor may government officials abuse their power to impose their personal religion on other people. Like that public school coach abusing his power to impose his personal religion on other people's children.
Andrew's latest book is American Crusade, How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom.
And that book's a follow-up to his previous book, The Founding Myth, right?
That's right.
And you know Andrew pretty well, don't you?
Yes, I am married to Andrew Seidel, and he used to be of FFRF. He's now with Americans United, but when he was working for FFRF was instrumental in working with the Baptist Joint Committee and others in producing the January 6th report on Christian nationalism's influence on the insurrection. So one of his partners in FFRF's January 6th report was Amanda Tyler of the Baptist Joint Committee. She's instrumental on the push for Christians who are opposed to Christian nationalism through her work at BJC. She was a presenter after Andrew and brought the Christian perspective on the threat of Christian nationalism. So we'll hear a little bit of Amanda Tyler's presentation next.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was not just a powerful and prophetic advocate for racial justice and economic justice, but also for religious freedom. He said that the church must be reminded that it is not the master or the servant of the state, but the conscience of the state. And really, Dr. King was speaking to this healthiest relationship between religion and government, and that is the institutional separation of church and state. That is, of course, the arrangement that is protected by the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment and many state constitutional and statutory provisions. And this arrangement is good for our pluralistic society. It speaks to this fundamental constitutional truth that one's belonging in American society should never depend on what we believe or how we worship or how we identify, whether it's religious identification or not. But this separation of church and state is also good for religious institutions. It gives religious institutions the necessary freedom to follow the dictates of their religion in ways that don't impose on the rights and freedoms of others without unnecessary government involvement. But opposing this long and deep legal tradition of separation of church and state has been an equally long and deeply seated political ideology of Christian nationalism. And I believe that the single biggest threat to religious freedom for all today is Christian nationalism.
So the Baptist Joint Committee and FFRF, as I mentioned before the clip, co-published a vital report on the January 6th insurrection. It's all about Christian nationalism's influence on the January 6th insurrection, and it's available at our website, ffrf.us/Jan6 report.
So many great speakers at the conference, and another wonderful speaker was Robert P. Jones. He's the founder and president of PRRI, the Public Religion Research Institute, which FFRF has cited and referred to often in their statistics. His newest book is called The Hidden Roots of White Supremacy, and I have to say that's one of my all-time favorite books on this topic. He gave a powerful and moving talk.
I think at the heart of our democracy is this unresolved question. I think it can actually be boiled down to something fairly simple that is directly rooted in this doctrine of discovery thing we have been wrestling with for 500 years. And the fundamental question before us is this one. Are we a divinely ordained promised land for European Christians, or are we a pluralistic democracy where everyone, regardless of race or religion or non-religion, stands on equal footing as citizens? I think it's as simple as that. Now, we've never fully resolved that question in all of our history and even in our prehistory, right? It has been with us, and it's in our laws, it's in our DNA, it's in our culture, right? These competing streams of American identity. We just had some legislators up here. In a legislative session, one of the ways you end a debate that might go on forever is somebody calls for the question, right? And when you call for the question, you have to stop debating and you have to take a vote, right? Assuming that passes. And I think we're at a moment in our history today where the question is being called, right? For us to answer this essential question. The demographic shifts, the tireless efforts of prophets and activists are calling the question. And affirming that latter vision today is really the only way, I say, we are going to live into America's promise and finally find the path to a shared American future. Thank you.
Again, Robert P. Jones's latest book is called The Hidden Roots of White Supremacy. It's available now.
Dan, you were straight evangelizing for that book at the convention. I'm pretty sure you single-handedly sold like all 50 copies that we had on the sales tables. You read that book to interview Robbie about it, and his talk was totally fascinating.
Yeah, and he's going to be on a future Free Thought Matters show as well. We just interviewed him. I think it'll air in November. But the books are great. The ones that are out there are amazing and wonderful. But his book was a real page turner. It was just like, wow, these stories in Oklahoma and Duluth, Minnesota, and in Mississippi, and all his background. It's just an incredible thing.
Yeah. Well, we also had a huge national journalism legal expert, Elie Mystal. He's so knowledgeable and so entertaining. He's a correspondent for The Nation. He was a big draw at our convention. He talked about his new book, Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. And we have a little clip of his talk. Here it is.
What I am an expert in, or at least what I play as an expert on TV as, at least until the actors' strike is over, is American law and its constitutional promise to craft a country not based on a shared religion, not based on a shared ethnicity, not based on a shared culture, but a shared commitment to the rule of law and secular equality. On that front, that I know something about, I can tell you that America is failing. We are failing as a secular nation and devolving into a brutal theocracy. And that failure is being led by the Supreme Court, which acts more like an unelected clergy than an impartial panel of judges. The heart of that failure goes to the Supreme Court's decision that there is religious tension written right into the First Amendment, and its decision to resolve that tension in the favor of fundamentalist Christians and nobody else. As most people here know, the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Lawyers call these two ideas the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. And on paper, they make a lot of sense, right? The government will not force people into a religion, and it will not stop people from practicing whatever they want. In practice, this country has always treated the Establishment Clause as an annoyance that mainly is there to get in the way of people saying Merry Christmas, while putting a whole lot of effort into the Free Exercise Clause, so long as the religion that you wish to exercise freely involves some mention of Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior. You know, bringer of good news, bringer of pizza, whatever it is. But as long as you have some mention of Jesus Christ, you're free to exercise your religion in whatever way you see fit. If you don't have that, if you have no religion, if your religion does not venerate Jesus Christ, then suddenly the country remembers that we're supposed to be secular and that we have an establishment clause that's supposed to prevent your exercise of your religion. Don't believe me? Try having your kids pray 7 times a day in the middle of school instead of praying just once on Sunday. And while you're there, tell me why Sunday isn't a school day to begin with.
Again, Elie Mystal's new book is Allow Me to Retort, A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution. It's available now anywhere you get your books. And he's so fun to read and listen to. He also has a podcast for The Nation. He writes frequently in The Nation and speaks on TV. And his whole beat is raising the alarm about the threat of the Supreme Court and how extreme and radical it is in imposing Christian theocracy through the law. And so it's kind of refreshing to hear his straight talk on that topic at our convention. It was really nice.
Well, that was funny what he said. People will have to watch it, but when he talked about his child going to the hospital, they asked him what religion he was. Well, he had a lot of humor in his talk. And by the way, why is Sunday not a school day? That's a good question.
Right?
So,
yeah, just the Christian supremacy and recognizing that, and also just calling out the Supreme Court in like full straight talk is what we like to hear. So he was great.
And speaking of humor and lightness, did you like Liz Winstead? She was just
She was so funny, and everybody loved Liz Winstead. She's just a legend in the comedy world, and she was our Saturday night keynote.
And she's a comedian. She's a political satirist. She was co-creator of The Daily Show. She was co-founder of Air America Radio and a founder of Abortion Access Front. This is a group of comedians and writers who use humor to destigmatize abortion.
Bodily autonomy is the one thing that we have. It is the thing we must hold dear, because it's the thing that with everything else in our lives, if we do not have that, then we are not 100% citizens of this nation. And so, I mean, why the government doesn't need to regulate our bodies. We have Activia for that. There's just things that are simple and that we know to be true. And how many of you were here to see Ellie speak earlier? Literally one of the smartest and most hilarious humans on the planet, and set me up for a lot of stuff tonight. And because one of the things that Ellie touched on was this imaginary way that you create a false scenario, right? And then it becomes a Supreme Court case or a law. And then it's this sort of cyclical thing you watch. Create a crackpot theory and then write a law that is going to fix the crackpot thing. And then the crackpot thing goes away. And then they're like, see, we fixed it. It's like, no, it never fucking existed. Like, this is this thing that we're living in where we all feel like we are losing our minds. This year in Texas, somebody proposed a law that they wanted to label all of the food products that had fetuses in them. Who's this for? Is it for people who are just desperately searching for food with fetuses, but they can't find it? Is it for people that have fetus allergies? At a restaurant, you're like, I'm sorry, you said this one didn't have fetuses. I don't have my EpiPen. I mean, okay, the king cake maybe, but like there is really no fetuses in food. I can imagine.
She was so funny. Liz Winstead's latest book is the very funny Liz Free or Die.
Yeah, definitely check out her book and then check out her speech in full on the website we posted earlier when those are posted next week. So we have some more pictures from the convention.
It wasn't just speeches. The convention was more than just talks, right?
Yeah, exactly. Events and, just the mixing with our members and the people who are here in Madison to see the convention. And, of course, they can come see Free Thought Hall.
There's Buzz Kemper there.
Yep.
Very lively audience.
It was. And we get to introduce all of our staff. That's Lisa Strand, our Director of Operations.
Students in the audience. Laughing. She's probably laughing at Liz Winstead there. Huh.
I know.
Meals.
Yep. We have...
and then legislators and members of government. And
there's Mary again. We have so many speakers, and that's the great part. We give out so many awards. There's Kate Cohen. We award student activists.
Questions from the audience.
Always so many questions from the audience.
Staffing the registration table. There's David Tamayo and Kate Cohen.
One of our awards.
And there's you, Liz.
Oh, yeah.
Up there with the legal panel. Some of the staff at the tables. And then our legislative C4 group gave a talk. And there's one of the student essay winners. And the band.
The Forward Marching Band. They are an activist band here in Madison.
Jeremiah Kamara talking about his new movie. He's a filmmaker. And then Mark Pocan, a representative, spoke to us. Then there was music. There's Charles Wilson on the drums, and there's some of Godless Gospel performers on Friday night. Hooping it up, not singing to Jesus.
That's right. This is our secular gospel choir, brainchild of Dan Barker, and it was absolutely the most
fun. And people were dancing and clapping and moving, and that was a lot of fun. Well, there's more to see, and we'll put up on our webpage, and then we'll also put in Free Thought Today.
That's
more
right.
about that. So, do we have questions?
Here,
let's
see.
You want to do them? Okay.
Sure. Here we go. Okay, so let's take some questions on the convention. How does FFRF manage to get so many amazing speakers all together for one weekend? Was it hard to host a convention like this? Well, this was our 46th annual convention, and it is a years long, next week we'll start planning for next year's convention.
We're already planning.
Yep.
And I have to say that Annie Laurie is the main convention speaker, organizer, and planner. And it's a balancing act because you want to lock in people far enough in advance to get some great speakers, but you also want to leave time for last-minute, timely things that might come up in the news.
Right.
So that's a trick to be able to do.
It is. And Annie Laurie Gaylor, our co-president, has many years of experience putting these together and kind of making that balance. And we've been lucky to get a lot of really great speaker lineups for the past few years. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of work goes into it, and it's a team effort to do the execution. But we've got it down. And then another question that's related to that question is when and where is next year's convention?
Well, I know it's Denver, and I think it's the end of September.
Yeah, late September.
Late September in
Info
Denver.
will be on our website very soon, and the date and location is already there.
Yeah.
So we're in Madison every third year.
Yeah.
So next year's in Denver, and then the year after that is also on the road in DC, I think.
Well, I'm not sure. It might be in DC. We're somewhere on the east.
Somewhere on the East Coast. Yeah. Okay. Here's a question. You said that the main theme of this convention was Christian nationalism. We don't have a theme, but that was definitely a through line. Do you feel more hopeful about fighting back against the movement having heard these speeches? Well, I'll go first and say that on the legal staff, at least, we talk all the time about how kind of rejuvenating and recharging the convention is. And a big part of that is that we get to meet our members and the constituency that we are working to represent. And that really helps us kind of stay energized to fight the uphill battle. But the other part of it is hearing all these great speakers that are doing different movement work towards secularism in their own spaces, and they're really motivating too, because you hear about other people who are doing the same work for secular democracy, and it's just really energizing. So,
and to answer the question a little bit more, I think we're witnessing a train wreck in slow motion right now as the courts are getting more and more conservative and more religious. At the same time that the country demographically is becoming less and less religious and more fed up with the conservatives. The courts have all this power, but the people themselves now are voting for gay rights and abortion rights and real religious freedom. Many of the speakers pointed out that the demographics are going to be a big part of our hope for the future.
Right.
And besides that, like the Black Lives Matter movement and the insurrection and all these things are turning off a lot of people. So, fixing the court was one suggestion about improving the future. But I think most all of them said, get involved, get politically involved. Don't just sit back and watch it happen. Let's make the change that we want to see happen.
Yeah. And I think to that end, so having Robbie Jones, who spoke about, or from PRRI, who spoke about kind of secularism growing statistically, and then also we had Sam Perry, who spoke on a similar topic. He does social science research. And so, he personally is a Christian, but he is, just has years and years of research experience kind of tracking the growth of the secular movement and how Christian nationalism as an ideology kind of goes hand in hand with other identities, other political identities and religious identities. And so it's always really kind of like reaffirming and empowering to kind of be armed with that knowledge, where the statistics are and where the demographics are, and kind of informing how we do our work and kind of what's really going on in the forces.
And a lot of Christians, as Amanda Tyler and Robbie Jones pointed out, a lot of them think it's a phony Christianity if it has to be forced by the government.
Right.
They're devout believers. They believe in Jesus. They go to church. They think it damages their faith for the government to be taking sides. And so that's why we agree. We think the government should be neutral so that we can all have our freedoms.
Right. Yeah, it was really energizing, as always. I was just blown away by some of the speakers, and the talent in our Godless Gospel was just really a point of pride.
Well, what about the piano playing interludes between things? Wasn't that kind of
That
okay?
was expert, as usual. Well, Dan is our resident musician, and like so many people, we're kind of atheist choir boys, atheist choir kids who really love the music and the that kind of catharsis and expression that you get from being part of a choir. And it's so hard for so many people that are, leaving religion to leave the music behind. And that's where the Godless Gospel is such a genius idea, where Dan and Andre Forbes, his partner, write all of these gospel songs that are all non-religious lyrics, and they're about freedom and
the natural world, and
Yeah.
I don't need Jesus to give me a smile. We'll hear a little bit in just a minute. We'll hear a little bit of Godless Gospel as we go out today.
Great. Well, that's all we had on the questions today. So I guess that concludes Ask an Atheist for this week. But don't forget, all of our convention speeches will be up on our website coming soon next week. This week, also, our broadcast TV show Free Thought Matters. We have a guest, Christine Keneally, the author of the haunting book, Ghosts of the Orphanage. It's about the horrible treatment of children in religious orphanages. Here's a preview.
The emotional abuse was equally awful for these little children who had been ripped away from their families, who were in these strange institutions, who didn't know anyone there, often didn't know why they were there, were often told that they were there because they were bad. And then nuns or priests or other individuals would say to them things like, "You are society's garbage," which literally tell them that they were waste. And then, of course, there was the sexual abuse as well. Jeff had been sexually abused. Many of the people that I met had also been sexually abused. And the sexual abuse was pervasive, and it was clearly networked. There were clearly individuals who went from these places, went from one to the other when the situation got a bit too hot. So it's just this absolute netherworld of abuse and exploitation and dehumanization of children.
You can see Free Thought Matters on TV stations all across the U.S. and also on FFRF's Facebook and YouTube channels.
And be sure to catch Free Thought Radio. This week, Annie Laurie Gaylor and I will be featuring some of the winners of FFRF's Student Essay Contest. You can find out how to hear Free Thought Radio at ffrf.org/radio.
And be sure to catch the latest episode of the We Dissent podcast, where you can hear me, Allison Gill, and Rebecca Markert. We're discussing the courts and the legislature in Texas and how they're messing with the civil rights of public school students. Find that anywhere you get your favorite podcast or online at we-dissent.org.
If you want more information about the Freedom from Religion Foundation, check out our website at ffrf.org. And if you're a member already, thank you. And if not, please join us. So as we wrap up today, let's close with a clip of Godless Gospel. That's former gospel musicians who are no longer singing for Jesus. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on FFRF's Ask an Atheist.
To the